this first slide is taken of me within the first week that I was in Rome. The director of the Academy asked us to dress properly and to be a representative of the United States. So you notice I'm wearing a tie. But then Corot, in his entire life, always wore a tie to paint with. So I guess it's not so bad. But here I am painting this monstrous picture. It wasn't until much later that a friend of mine, a painter, said, Michael, you know, if you painted on something sort of this size, you'd be able to see the object and draw, and just you're very likely to keep it in proportion. But if you have to look down and look back up and look down and back up, you're never going to get the proportion of the building. I took the second year, I took his advice, and so the drawings got much, much smaller. And I have to set the stage for you. The Grand Tour gets its name from 17th, 18th, and 19th century architects, dilettantes, sculptors, painters, rich kids, going first to Egypt, then to Greece, to see the ruins and, of course, the Parthenon and so on. And then to Italy, where they started in Venice, went to Florence, down to Rome, ultimately to Pompeii and Herculaneum, where they were digging for a very long period of time. Most of those things that they found in Pompeii are now in the Naples Museum. And we'll have more of that later. But anyway, for 2 years at the American Academy, I did my own, or we did our own grand tour. My former wife is here tonight, so I have to behave. And she says if I get it wrong, she's going to put her hand up. So, and she will. So anyway, the grand tour for me was, as I have just said, everything, but I didn't go to Egypt. But we went to a lot of Central Europe and to Spain and to England and other places that the grand tour artists did not go to. Now, I was from this place, which was in those days Indianapolis, and it didn't have any kind of cosmopolitan air whatsoever, and that's not looking down on Indianapolis. It just wasn't the same as it is now with a string of wonderful mayors and the urban development downtown and so on. No wonder people want to come here for the Final Four and all of that. Speaking of basketball, you'll be out tonight early enough for some reason, the Hoosiers don't play until 9:45. There's a game before theirs. And Syracuse will be tough, but we know who's going to win. So if you miss the game, just tune in tomorrow morning for the score. I'm trying to describe for you somebody who was not wholly, how shall I say, conversant with the idea of urbanity in the city and so on. In my graduate class at Harvard, out of 36 people, I was the only one who had never been to Europe. Now, that puts you at a little disadvantage when you're doing projects all over the world and so on in school. But nevertheless, I got to Rome, and this is the American Academy in Rome. And to say that my jaw dropped is to say that I was awestruck by this great building. The building was built in 1912 by American architects, Stanford White and Company. My studio was up here. My terrace was there, not bad. And these are the gardens behind the academy. In those days, you could play tennis there, no more. This was the front gate. I'm sorry it's so light in here. Imagine this in Technicolor. But anyway, these were the gates, so I actually took these pictures coming into the academy on my first trip. And this is the forecourt. It's covered over. It has a wonderful echoey sound because there's a sarcophagus over here that has a little fountain in it. Nobody's in it, but there's a fountain there. And up you go to a loggia, which is here. We're standing at the front door of the academy. This is the door to the rare books room of the library. This loggia goes all the way around a cortile, and here it is from the side, looking across to the other side. There's a little piece of sculpture by St. Gaudens. And on the walls over here, I don't know whether you can see them or not, there are little plaques and fragments of digs that the archaeologists found and stuck into the walls. Those are highly treasured and called spolii, as in spoils, and to show what you've been involved in terms of your archaeological explorations. In the summertime, there are tables put along here for you to have lunch and dinner, and it is magical beyond your imagination. Now, a short story. When I got there, I had, first of all, at the University of Cincinnati, where I was an undergraduate, I didn't learn Palladio, I didn't learn Vitruvius, I didn't learn architecture, I learned how to design. And I'm saying that in the pejorative. I learned Mies van der Rohe. I could do a wonderful Mies building, but I didn't know what architecture was. When I got to Harvard, I wasn't allowed to do Mies buildings. I could only do Le Corbusier buildings. And I still didn't know who Palladio was. And I remember one day, I was at my desk at Harvard, and I had big elephant folder open because we were doing a theater, concert hall. And I was looking at Garnier's Paris Opera. These wonderful drawings. And the dean, who was a Spaniard, José Luis Sert, was a tiny man. We called him Teeny Weeny Deeny. He came up to my desk. We had tall desks and sat on tall stools, and he looked at my desk and he said, "What in the world are you looking at, Mr. Graves?" And I said, "I'm looking at Paris Opera." He said, "What for?" I said, "Because we're doing a theater, and I wanted to look at the section." And he, with all his might, he closed the book with a great flap, and he said, "You won't need that here at Harvard." So that was the ahistorical kind of milieu of what I was up against in trying to become an architect. So Rome was a very welcome place for me. And we sat at the dining table each night, about 30 of us. And the archaeologists and the classical scholars and the musicians and the painters and so on would talk to each other. And it wasn't long before you realized they knew what they were talking about. These were very, very smart people, all of them PhDs in the classical fields and so on. And they were talking about these minute conditions of their investigations and so on. And I sat there and I thought, well, you've got to be smart enough, Michael, to be quiet and not say a thing. Don't reveal that you don't know yet. So I didn't reveal it. I listened. I listened for an entire year. And the second year, this is my studio. Not bad for a Hoosier. I'll get to what I did about my scholarship. But I was looking, you look out into the city of Rome, down to the Aqua Paulo, and it is simply glorious. And this was my terrace. The white building in the landscape beyond is the French Academy. And it was the first academy in Rome. The French were followed by 27 other academies in the city. In fact, the Spanish Academy is right below the American Academy. And so this isn't bad at all for getting together in the afternoon and reading a book or whatever I did there. This is the Aqua Paulo. Somehow I think I'm missing a slide. Yeah. This is the library at the Academy. And this is what I did every night. I might have a quick game of pool, and then down to the library I would go and, and I tried to, as the TV show says, get smart. So I read and I drew and I read some more. And when we would plan a trip to other parts of Italy or to other parts of Central Europe, my wife Gail and I would plan it together. She did all the language and would determine which buildings we were going to see from certain of the texts that she looked at, and I would look at other texts and make a little note that certain things couldn't be missed. So we were a very good team in looking at at what we were intending to know about. And by the second year, we earned our stripes and we were able to talk. But this was not a bad room to spend a year in. Every book is just filled with the stuff that I didn't know. And so this was an amazing journey for me. Okay, this is the Aqua Paulo, which is a great fountain just below the Academy. I say below because the Academy is on the highest hill in Rome. It's called the Janiculum. And you come down the Janiculum down into the city, 7 hills and all of that. But the aqueducts that fed water to Rome, especially after the first century, in more modern times, the 18th and 17th century, the aqueducts were still used, the Aqua Claudius and so on, were still used in Rome. And they would come along the landscape, and then when there was a fall in the landscape coming into Rome, the Romans, instead of just making a pipe that would collect the water down at the next hill, made a fountain like this and celebrated the water coming into the city. And each one of those would get a saint's name. And so the kind of beat goes on. And these wonderful fountains were then found all over the city. And from this point, the water would then go past the French Academy and fall down further, and a smaller 19th century fountain would then take the water into Rome itself. Now, when I was drawing in the first year I was there, as I showed you, the paper was 30 by 40 inches, I think, and I would make these big washes. This is Santo Nome di Maria on the left, and Santivo della Sapienza by Borromini on the right. And again, I'm glad I'm sorry these don't project very well. And there's San Carlino alle Quattro Fontane on the left, again by Borromini, and the sister church to Santo Nome. I realized that after drawing many domes, whether in Florence or in Rome, as these show you, you could write a treatise on the character of buildings relative to their domes. The city of Rome is a domed city, unlike Florence or Venice. It is a domed city because of when most of the Baroque and Rococo buildings were built. Now, the influence on me as I came back to the United States, I in fact built a couple of modern houses, two of them in Fort Wayne. One of them, I'm sorry to say, is burned down, the Snyderman House. You know Nancy Snyderman from the television, it's her parents. But the mural for the dining room for that house lives on in the Indianapolis Art Center. The Hanselman House is an interesting house that I understand it's for sale, so get your checkbooks out. But I did those houses after I got back, not really letting Rome into what I was feeling, and little by little, as I got more projects to do, I realized the language of modernism simply didn't allow me to tell the stories that I wanted to tell. The narrative was missing. I was a pretty good designer of those kinds of buildings, those houses, but I couldn't take it any further. I wasn't growing. So that's the state of mind that I was in, but I didn't know what to do with what I'd learned in Rome. But I was out walking one day on a Sunday, and I looked down a long driveway, and I saw this building, which was a ruin in Princeton, New Jersey. That's an oxymoron. There are no ruins in tidy little Princeton, New Jersey. But there it was, nevertheless, and I found out that in the 20s, this building had been built by Italian masons who had come to Princeton, brought by the university, to build dormitories in the Gothic manner for the university and do all the masonry work. Well, they moonlighted this place for a friend of theirs, and they didn't build an American warehouse. They built a Tuscan barn. Well, nothing could be sweeter for me than to have such a place. So I actually added the pergola here, and of course the wisteria, and this tower here was once a stair, and there was a door here, a metal door that swung open. And my daughter, who's here tonight, would get on that stair, which is not a stair then, which was an elevator, a hand-operated elevator that went up. I made it a stair because it was a little safer. And therein lies the story of the warehouse, 1927. This is under the pergola, which is very pleasant. And then here's the old man looking out at a series of sycamore trees. I was telling everybody it was the state tree of Indiana. It's not. But it's in the song, the Hoagie Carmichael song. So I always thought it was, but I guess the tulip tree is. How boring. Anyway, a client of mine called and said that she was having second thoughts about her landscape plan that I had planned for her, and did I want the 8 sycamore trees, and I could have them free if I'd pay for the shipment from Long Island to Princeton. And then I said, oh yes, 3 bags full. And so I got the trees, and they form an alley back here to a gate that actually goes out to a park. And then on the other side of the park is my office. My neighbors, before I moved in, who live on the other side of this wall, built this wall because they thought the warehouse, is what I call it, was so ugly. But I liked it so much, I built the wall around the other sides of the garden, or the yard. I keep forgetting, I'm from Indiana. It's not a garden, it's a yard. This is the side of the building, but that I had to in part destroy. When I was paralyzed 10 years ago, I had to build an elevator. So I put the elevator here. I needed the openings there. And so the topiary had to go away. So this is the elevator here, and there's the front door to the warehouse there in my painting of it. And here is there's an entrance courtyard, not unlike the Academy, except quite a bit smaller. And there is a sarcophagus, and there is a little fountain. And so you get that same dribbling noise. My friends say I should turn it off because it sounds like somebody peeing. So I don't think that's true. You wouldn't either. You'd see the romanticism in it. The water theme from the sarcophagus continues here with Borromini's great Trident fountain in the Palazzo Barberini. It's always a good idea to plan your drawings ahead. Then you might see the water spouting up from the last shell that he holds. Here are dolphins down here, which were the inspiration for my dolphins here on the hotel for Disney. And then there are 4 what I call piers of rooms, 5 stories of rooms that come out and shorten the whole line and make a more compact hotel. And on top of those are fountains that spray up, and you can just barely see it there. And so that on a windy day, the fountain goes way up and comes back down on the side of the building. It's rather wonderful. Oh, sorry. This is just a little vignette of things that I will show you now. We used to go to the Porta Portese, which was a flea market, and buy these things for $5. They were 18th century candelabros from various churches that had thrown them out. Now, on the left, I'm showing you a picture of a series of magnifying glasses. An architect friend of mine, Massimo Scolari, Italian, has a 19th century desk, Italian drafting desk, and it has a series of little drawers, and in the drawers are all the wooden equipment that architects would use at that time. And I love the idea of it so much, collecting what architects worked with in days past. And so I started to collect these magnifying glasses because we also use those for our fine drawings, the fine lines of our drawings. And as you see, they all have ivory handles. Of course, that's a no-no today, is that they're endangered, so they're not for sale anymore. But these are all 150 years old, so these kinds of antiques are still for sale. But I thought they would be a good idea. It'd be a good idea for me to start to collect handles as well as the glass, because I had every intention of making things for somebody like Target or now like JCPenney. And so here's a collection of spatulas and other implements, potato masher and so on, for Target that we did 15 years ago. And I wanted to make handles that would be good for anybody who's normal, but also for people who are arthritic and people who are octogenarians and so on, and might have a harder time gripping the handle. I did not want to make something abstract, or you might pick up the wrong end. These are more handles. These are for an Italian company called Valley and Valley, when America was switching over because of ADA to what we call French hardware today, the lever handles. And then this shows the interior of my living room. All the furniture is Biedermeier, as I got there early before it got to be outrageously expensive. And I had a friend in New York who was dealing Biedermeier furniture, so he would call me when there was a good piece for sale. But now you can't afford it, so don't try. The two comfortable chairs in the middle of the room are actually prototypes that I did for a hotel in La Jolla. I covered these in my own fabric, so they fit quite nicely in the room. I'll show you the room from a different aspect. Now you see on the right-hand side a big piece of wallpaper, actually, which is hand-blocked, wood-blocked in France. And this is reproduced after it was first made from a sketch by David. And then Dufour and others made a dining room for a Bavarian couple where they have 17 of these in different scenes. And I like this scene the best. It's not quite appropriate to have Psyche at the bath in your living room, but no, my friends don't notice, so they're clods. My house had a kind of structural issue in that there was a beam that came across the living room at the end of the room up here. And that meant that I would either have a big room with a beam hanging down, which would be very psychologically uncomfortable, I thought, or I could make a second room, which I did. And this works out really well for parties and that sort of thing. People come back here and sit here and have a quiet tete-a-tete, or bring a stool around and there's a threesome then. Most of what I will show you tonight is not original, in that like the Grand Tour people, they made drawings of something else, something Greek, something Egyptian, something Italian, something Pompeian. And they would even sculpt it and have it cast in Naples at the end of their tour. And when I say their tour, unlike my 2 years, they didn't go for 2 years, they went for 4 to 6 years. And they often walked. Le Corbusier walked over the Pyrenees when he took his grand tour with a German architect, the two of them. But we're now looking at something that isn't a second or after the work of. There's a painting in the middle of the slide, which is a Prud'homme. Prud'homme was a wonderful 19th century French painter who had been asked to paint the scene of good driving out evil, which is known in mythology, for the French government and for the Palace of Justice. Well, like any good classical painter, he painted all the figures within that composition many, many times. If you have an interest in your collection here at the IMA, I found an Ingres that I thought I could get under my coat, but I left on the wall. And it is actually a collage of hands and arms and heads turned in various directions, painted by that great French painter who was the first academician to go to the French Academy. But this is what's happened to this painting. What the painting that Prud'homme did was 4 times the size of this one, but he made smaller studies. And he got invitations from all the little towns around Paris and their palaces of justice, palais of justice, to have the same painting. Well, they couldn't afford the big one. So what Prud'homme did was paste the various figures together on one composition, and probably the studio would fill in the gaps between the figures, and then sell them to the smaller municipalities, a kind of entrepreneurial move. Well, I got a call from a friend of mine who was at the Academy years after I was there. I knew this person from Princeton, and she called and she said, I can't talk long because these calls cost too much money. That was before the internet. We were still talking about purple fax. And she said, I have found in an antique shop, not a painting gallery, a Prud'homme, and the guy, this is not a myth, but the guy doesn't know what he's got. He wants to sell it for the cost of the frame, which is a period frame. These frames are plaster, even with all the Baroque corners that you see. All of that is plaster. And so they had certain value. So he wanted a couple of $1,000s for the frame with the picture in it. So I got a real Prud'homme. And there was a Prud'homme show about 15 years ago at the Met, and I went, and I liked mine better than any of the other ones. I was prejudiced. The other painting in that niche is by Richard Wilson, and you have a wonderful Richard Wilson upstairs that I saw this afternoon. It's a big one, but to date him, he's about 100 years before Corot. Corot's about 1850, he's about 1750. That's not a real Richard Wilson. That's me being Richard Wilson. So I should say that because all the rest of these paintings are me after the real person. Now these are 2 niches just off the living room, and I show it to you because I think the little piece of Biedermeier on the left, the little cabinet there, is about the best piece of furniture that I own. And there's the Richard Wilson on the right. Now I'm showing you a little collection I have that I didn't buy. People gave me because they're all sarcophagi. They all say it's a play on your name, Michael. Don't you get it? And you get it? Okay. There in the corner is the sarcophagus of Napoleon right here. And it starts out with wonderful paw feet, and then the body of the sarcophagus, and then a pillow, and Napoleon's great hat on the pillow. But that's his tomb. All of these were used for an inkwell, so they had a purpose. You take them home to mom and dad, what you studied, and looked at, and copied, and so on. So here's the pillow, and here's the hat. Now this cornice is going to come off, and here it is on the ground with the pillow and the hat. And here's powder, and here's ink in the sarcophagus. So it worked out fine for that. And then you take the powder and the ink off, and there's the tomb itself. And you look in the tomb, and there's Nappy. So I guess they had a sense of humor as well. This is my library at my house. And as I said, nothing is real. My wood is MDF. Those of you who don't know what MDF is, it's multi-density fiberboard. It's not real. And the little columns are plastic. They're used for plumbing. So they're little plastic pipes. And then I painted them. And my friend Peter Eisenman, some of you know his name, came to my house once, and Peter has a really good collection of modern architecture. I have a good collection of architecture. Peter has a good collection of modern architecture, probably the best in the world. And he looked at my library and he said, "Gravesy, I hate you. I loathe you. I hate you." Have I said I hate you? I said, "What's the matter, Peter?" He said, "I've got a collection of architecture books. You don't. You and Meyer and Gwathmey upset me because you all have these spectacular libraries with bird's eye maple, and I've got IKEA." So I invited him to go over and tap the column, which he did. There was this little hollow sound. He said, "What is this, veneer?" I said, "Oh yeah, that is veneer. That's plastic veneer." This doesn't show very well, but this is the library inside the American Academy in Rome. I was asked years later to come back and do the library. In other words, make this old studio, which it was a photography studio, into a library. The trouble was they wanted wooden shelves and wooden dividers, but they couldn't have wood next to the precious documents and books for the rare books. They had to have something inert. So what I did was, I don't know whether you can see, but there's a square shape within the colonnade. For instance, up here, there's a square of steel. So the books are within a steel cabinet, and the steel cabinet is inside the wood. It all works out fine, and everybody's happy. So that's the rare books library of the American Academy. I learned an important lesson. The roof of this is actually a vault that goes over like that, like in my house. And unlike the great vault at Pompeii, I didn't put ribs on it. If I'd put faux ribs on it and painted it, you would have seen that it is, because you'd have read the ribs in succession, you would have seen that it's vaulted. But with the light the way it is, it just goes to an atmosphere of the way I look out at the light outside. It's just clouds. These are two pictures of my dining room in the warehouse, and one in afternoon light here, which is very romantic, and then one in morning light, which is a bit brighter. And I show you these because I want to describe this little number here on the mantelpiece. This is a Pompeian kitchen. It's here a big tray with feet, real feet, well, animal feet at least, and a big vessel here with a spout, a trident spout there. Everything had a story. This was before modern science, obviously. So they had to have stories behind everything that they ate, they worshipped. All of it was storytelling. And this is another pot. Actually, it's two pots. You can see the two handles. And then there's a measuring spoon turned over to be a lid on this pot. The coals would have been here and under here. I bought this at a little sale at Christie's, and it was very inexpensive, and nobody knew what it was, and so nobody was bidding on it, except this lady who had big hair, blue hair from Texas. I could hear her across the room, I gotta have that. So I couldn't tell her that no matter what she bid, I was gonna outbid her. But she gave up after the third round, and then I was downstairs paying for it later, and she ran up to me and she said, "Oh, you bought it. Oh, do you know what it is?" I said, "Yes, it's a kitchen. This is how you cook food in Pompeii." "Oh, I just thought it was darling. It looks so good in my den in Dallas." I said, "Well, I got it. I'm sorry. You lose." Now my dining room has this side room just like my living room does. And here is Aurora by Guido Reni on the wall. Well, it's not really Guido Reni. It's an American Grand Tour artist in the 19th century. I went to an auction in Chicago with my friend Stanley Tigerman, and everything in the auction was bad modern. And people were buying it all left and right, and up on the wall, so nobody could see it, was Guido Reni's Aurora. And finally it came up. It was really the only figurative thing there, and I was the only one that stuck up my paddle. And I bought it for $300. And I'm glad I didn't have to bid against somebody who knew what it was. But I've had a lot of luck in getting the things I've got. Now in that niche, we also have a series of Biedermeier cups. You can see them here. And I started buying Biedermeier cups because I was fascinated with their handles and their coloration. And we're going to see what happens to that in a minute. Now here's a chest of drawers with two paintings and a drawing on it, and then a cup, which isn't a copy. It's a real thing, and it's by Joseph Hoffman. And it's a very expensive piece that was a gift. I'll tell you how I got it. I was doing the addition to the Whitney Museum, which of course wasn't built, but I got to the Whitney early one day, one of the meeting days, and went across the street to a little gallery called Modernism. And this cup was in Modernism. And I immediately called Wendell Cherry, who was the president of Humana and told him, because he collected Joseph Hoffman and De Chirico and other good people, I said, there's this great cup, and it's one of the best things that Joseph Hoffman ever did. You've got to have it. And he said, well, Michael, I'm very busy here. What is it? And it was very vague, and I explained and described it to him, and he said, well, I'll tell you what, on my next trip to New York, I'll go into Modernism and if it's still there, I'll give it a whirl. So the next week, I went to my weekly meeting at the Whitney, and again, I was a little early. I went across to modernism, and it was gone. So I said, well, he had his chance. And then the building, the Humana building, got finished, and there was a black tie event with a lot of important local people from Louisville and so on, and he had thanked the governor, and he had thanked the mayor, and he thanked the contractors and the engineers, and then the architects. And I don't know why I was last. And I went up and shook my hand, and I was going back to my seat. He said, oh, wait, I've got something for you. And I went back up, and he gave me a box this big. And he said, aren't you going to open it? I said, I know what's in it. A very happy time for me. Now, on the right-hand side is if you don't know what I'm doing up here, I'm looking at a screen of the same thing you're looking at. On the right-hand side is another Grand Tour object, a gladiator. But below on the table, which is a tripod, which was found at Pompeii in a men's club. Well, it wasn't quite the way it is now. It suffered mightily in the hands of the Victorians. These tripods, they got their oak leaf at that point, and so there are 3 oak leaves going around on these figures supporting the tripod. Maybe you didn't get that. The little objects there are all Temple of Vesta. There's a Temple of Vesta in Rome, and there's one in Tivoli. This is my painting of the one in Tivoli. But all of these little tempiettos are again inkwells to take home. Now, we just left the dining room and we're walking to the kitchen, and everybody should have on their walk from your dining room to your kitchen a still life. The still life is, of course, depicts the cycle of the day, the week, the month, the year for the harvest. And whenever you look at a still life, you'll see a piece of bread which would have to be replaced tomorrow because it'll be stale, or you'll see the cat or a bee or something eating the food, making it so that you have to replace it. I'm prolonging this because you have a still life upstairs in your gallery, and I've tried to think of the painter's name. He is the still life painter of all still lifes. Terrible, but you've got one. It's this big. Again, it would fit just under your coat, and I'd take it home. So this is my still life going into my kitchen, and here is the kitchen, a little overdone in Target. What style are you? I'm Target. And while I'm saying something about Target, there won't be any more of my objects at Target. We've ended our relationship with them and started a new one with J.C. Penney. You must go to J.C. Penney in the middle of next month. I was at your J.C. Penney day before yesterday, and they're building our shop. We're going to have a shop within the store of 200 to 300 objects. You can already buy them online, but do go. And it's something we never had at Target. And we're right across the aisle from Martha Stewart. So she'll bring the people in and they'll buy my things. So that's the way it should be. She's rich enough. Here's looking at my little breakfast room. Did I show it to you before? there it is on the right-hand side. You can see it down there at the end with Romulus and Remus. Here they are, again on the right-hand side, with a lot of Etruscan, Greek, and Roman cups that we bought at the Porto Portese for $5 and $10. What they would do is try to sell you a cup, and there'd be a big glob of mud on it where the handle is supposed to be, and then a handle which obviously didn't belong to the cup, but glued on with this glob of mud. So it still has lots of value when I've got a lot of handles, and then I've got cups too. And here on the table is a tea service by Alessi that we did for Alessi, and luncheon plates and silverware and so on we did for Alessi. And then this little room looks out into a little garden, a little yard behind, which was owned by my neighbor. And she said if I cut the grass, I could use it. But the town wouldn't let me use it because I didn't own the property, and I couldn't open my doors out to property that wasn't mine. And so I had to wait for her to croak, and then I bought her house. And yeah, I've got her backyard. That's the way it works. On the second floor, there's a skylight that looks down from here, which is up here, to down here, and then light that comes across here, into, this is tempered glass, so it's not going to break. But I did have a balustrade around this. But my therapist, who came to look at my house to get it ready for me coming home from therapy, said that I would have to remove the balustrade, and so I could go straight across this. She thought I would fill this in, but I didn't. So that lights the little rotunda on the first floor as well. There's a spare bedroom. That couch opens up into a bed, but not very comfortable, so you wouldn't want to come. But here's a chair that would have been produced about 1900. Of course, it's Egyptian, and it's the Egyptian revival. In Egypt, it would have been white with hieroglyphics along this panel, and they would have talked about the owner of the chair as it had great lion's feet. Here, look at the back. I just think it's marvelous. Here's a great strut that comes down here, and the back tilts back here to be comfortable. On the right-hand side is a Cleese chair, which is Greek. This is an American version of it, and this was the Greek revival. And it has a bent wood back long before Charles Eames. This is plywood, and there was American ingenuity in 1890. So I'm really pleased with that as well. The painting up here was the first painting I ever bought. It's German. It wasn't very expensive, but yeah, I loved it because it had 5 other paintings in it, and then the reflections of the paintings in a mirror over here, the wall. So suddenly I had 7 paintings, and I thought I had a collection. Here's a little room that I use as a study. Actually, I don't use it very much after paralysis, but before that I did. Architecture I learned after losing my legs and so on is a very physical sport, and so you need to get up and down and around and all of that as you're doing drawings. And so I now have a tablet that fits on my chair, and that's a poor excuse for such a nice little room as that is. In my bedroom, you can barely see them, but I have shutters that are solid shutters, which are here, and that's on 2 leaves, and that stretches across 1, 2 leaves here, and then 1 leaf there, which swings around and blocks this. Same thing on the other side. Like the shutters of Rome, here on the Via Condotti in Rome, there's a wooden shutter, which is on a piano hinge here. And then inside that, there's the steel shutter that comes down, and you know very well, those of you who stayed in a hotel in Italy. And then behind that, there's probably a velvet shutter or curtain. So you're pretty well secluded from the street noise there. So I had a neighbor who lived in the house at the end of my driveway, and she saw me in the driveway one day when she was getting into her car, and she said, "Michael, come here, man, I want to talk to you." She said, "I don't know whether you care or not, but I can see you dressing in your bedroom." And she said, "You know, I don't care." She likes girls, so she didn't care. I said, "Franny, I'll do something about it." So I did. Here are 2 pictures of my of 2 bathrooms. Ooh, we're almost in questions and answers, but I'm showing you this because I wanted to show you this clock, which is here. There's a really nice story I was going to tell you about that door, but never mind. Here's that clock, which is here. The lid comes off, and hanging on a hook inside is a man's pocket watch, which is there. And when he went to work to the brewery or wherever he went in Bavaria, he would take the watch out, have time all day long. The rest of the family had no idea what time it was. But when Alessi asked me to do a mantel clock, I did this clock again. Here's my clock. It has a lid that comes off. My clock is real, and it stays there. But this is voided here, and you wouldn't know that that's a secret safe, so you can put your passport in there or your loose change or whatever. And we call it the Timekeeper. Here is the Alessi Tree Service that the IMA owns, and it's dedicated to Joyce Summers, I understand. So here it is. And it was the first project that I did for Alessi. He actually asked a dozen architects to do a tea service of sterling silver. He didn't care what they cost because they would be too expensive and nobody would buy them. Well, I did mine, and other people did theirs, and mine was, I think, the least expensive. I know Richard Myers was $40,000. Mine was $25,000. And Alessi's hope that nobody would buy them did not come true. I have to tell you the very short story. I know this is your time for questions and answers, but this is the question you wanted to ask. I went to dinner at the White House, and I didn't know why, because it was during Reagan's administration. That ought to tell you something. And the nice Marine who was my chaperone came up to me after dinner and he said, "Mrs. Reagan would like to see you in the Blue Room." And I said, "Would you take me? I don't know where the Blue Room is." And he said, yes, he would. And we went in, and there she was, waiting. And we had some small talk, and then she said, "I bet you wonder why you were invited." I said, "It did pass my mind." She said, "Well, I have read that you love the exhibition of plates, silverware, and stemware that we have in the basement of the White House of all the former presidents." I said, "I do. I think it's very telling about their administrations." She said, I agree. She said, "Well, I would like your Alessi tea service to be amongst all of those pieces." And I said, "Well, that would be very nice." She said, this was the hard question. Then she said, so would you donate yours? And I said I was an architect, and I didn't make any money, and I didn't own one. And then we thought about that for a minute, and she said, well, we're not allowed to buy it. It has to be a gift to the White House. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. Next trip to Italy, I'll ask Alessi if he would like to donate it along with maybe the Italian government to the White House. And he could get headlines. It would be terrific. And so she said, oh, let's do that. That sounds wonderful. I don't see anything wrong with that. So I asked Alessi the next time I went to Crusanello, where their offices are. And after I'd asked him, he said, what? Say that again in Italian. And I repeated it again. And one more time, again, ancora. And so I said it again, and he said, you tell Mrs. Reagan the next time you see her that Alberto Alessi said. Now, that has nothing to do with Mrs. Reagan. So I don't want to get any angry letters from you red state Republicans. But I did have a chance to tell her later about this, what happened. She thought it was hilarious. And she laughed and laughed and laughed. So there. But Alessi came to me and he said, I have a proposition for you. Since, I didn't tell you that little story got into the New York Times. And once it was in the New York Times, we sold 40 sets of these. So Alessi was really chagrined. He didn't want to do that. He didn't want to make them, because this is what he wanted to make, a tea kettle. So he came to me and he said, you seem to have a knack for selling things. So he said, would you do an American tea kettle? And I said, does water boil differently in the United States than it does in Italy? And he agreed that he misspoke, but he said, make it American, whatever that is. So I gave it a little humor with the bird. I used to spend my summers on my uncle's farm in Greensburg, Indiana. And so now I have the bird waking us up, as they had a rooster. And this little number has sold 2 million so far. My royalty is 1/10 of 1 cent per kettle. It was called a descending royalty. I didn't know what that was in 1985. I do now. For Wood Powell, we did a Melita maker, sugar creamer, and the lines going across the Melita maker itself. It had a filter at the top. This is the Target story, real quick. Target asked me not to do any objects for them, but to do a scheme for the Washington Monument. They were going to pay for the renovation of the Washington Monument, and they wanted me to design the scaffolding. They didn't want it wrapped like a Christo. They just wanted something that would tell a story. So my scaffolding is actually in the form of running bond. I don't see any in this room, but it's the way architects put two stones together here and a third stone splitting the difference, and on. It's more structurally sound that way. The stones of the Washington Monument obviously are much smaller than the scaffolding braces, but nevertheless, we could tell a story. We made a little book for Target on, first, who was George Washington? Why did they name the city after him? Who was L'Enfant? how was the plan made, why an obelisk in an American city, and why does it need repointing and all of that. And so it was just at the end, and the scaffolding was ready to come down. And it seems I get along with all the presidents' wives, because Mrs. Clinton called me and she said, could you convince Target to rent the scaffolding for 3 more months so we can use it for the turn of the millennium? And so she said, the French have the Eiffel Tower and we don't have anything. So with the lighting of the Washington Monument, this will be perfect. And that's why I show it to you with the lighting. For Target, one of the first things we did, because there was such a good one done for the Bauhaus, and what I am doing, or what I did for Target and now I'm doing for JCPenney, is what the Bauhaus and the Wiener Werkstätte wanted to do. And that is to make good design for the masses. But without mass production, they didn't have a chance. Everything was made by hand, so everything was expensive. So with mass production, we can do that. So I can make a chess set for $39, and theirs is $400. So that's really the difference. Here are a group of Alessi and Target things. I put them together because I wanted to show you some circles in my architecture. And these are all circles. This is the baker's tomb in Rome, and that's a symbol of the ovens that you see when you read the baker's tomb from outside. And it is right next to the wall, which meant that he had to do something else besides be a baker, because that meant that he was a very, very rich man. The further out you get on the Appia Antica, the less money you had. And so here's the baker with these wonderful circular windows, which are ovens symbolically. On the right-hand side, I'm showing you a really awkward picture. I put my camera up like this and took a picture of an atrium in Shanghai of a building we renovated, 3 on the Bund. And it has circular windows like the baker's tomb on either side, because there are dining rooms on either side. And I didn't want them to have a lot of light, and I wanted them to have a little release from the room, but I didn't want them to look at each other's dinner across that little chasm. Oh, stopping. Here's a house on the Scheldt River, just outside of Amsterdam. And you see the character of the round windows on the roof. They're in the 3rd floor bedrooms. And they're reflected in the water of the Scheldt rather neatly. This is a little building in Tsukuba City, Japan, where we had designed the whole building, but without that red rotunda. And they said, we are so pleased that the city has given us an opportunity to buy this property and to build our building on it. The city is so kind to us, imagine. And we want to give something back to the city. And so we kind of put our heads together, and it ended up that the artisans in town didn't have a place to show their work. So I said, let's make a gallery for them, and we'll use it as a porte cochere for you. So the cars come under here, and you get out, and then your car is parked by a valet, and upstairs and into the gallery, or into the lunchroom, or into the meeting rooms, or behind your desk up here. This is another influence. This is the Cryptoporticus of Jupiter in Terracina. I love the way the arches mark the structural grid of the building as you're walking along here and getting light from one side, supporting the building on the other. On the right-hand side is a little hallway that I did for a school in Washington. Here's the schoolroom here, another one there, another one there. And I was standing there one day that it was opening, and this is for severely autistic kids. And a little boy came up to me in very broken language. He pulled on my sleeve and he said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm the architect. I was the one who designed the building." He said, "Who designed this room?" I said, "Well, I did." And he said, "Who'd you build it for?" All of this was in terribly broken English. And I said, "I built it for you." And he said, "No, nobody ever does anything like this for us." It was so heart-wrenching. But I said, "Well, we did." And he said, "Thank you." And that was so sweet. Here's more Rome drawings on there, up on the left, and then on the foundations of the forum on the upper right. And the lower right, that becomes an influence on a hotel that I did on the Red Sea. Here is, this guy is, in fact, the lifeguard. And he's patrolling our beach here. And I am not kidding. Now here, the idea was, unlike Indianapolis or Princeton, where I'm from, we're trying to keep the light out. So here's shutters there, more shutters there, and very small skylights there, because the light is so incredibly intense. This is the Basilica of Maxentius and Constantine, 312, and has the same influence. Now this is the part I was going to leave out, so I'm sorry. I've got to get to the end. So look quickly. That's me in rehab. That's a horizontal drain so that you can get a wheelchair into a bathroom. You're all going to need it, so you might as well do it now, because you can't have a curb on your shower, all you baby boomers. This is a hospital that we did in Tallahassee. And the Philadelphia Eagles Training Center here. This is why they are so muscular. These are pieces that we did for the a healthcare company called Drive, and I won't go into that. And this is if you were at the mall and got tired, you unzip this and the cane falls out, and then you've got a cane, and then you can put it back in. And we won't talk about this poor old dear here. And this is winning lots of awards. Never mind. Never mind. This is called Stand Assist Chair. Here it is. Here's the family. Here's a new one. We're getting heavily into healthcare. And finally, I'll show you just this one project, which is a $5 billion project. And it was 6 hotels, a Maritime Museum here, retail. What pays for the whole thing is a casino, and it's next door to a Universal theme park over here, which we had nothing to do with. This is a mock-up room, and I show it to you here. There's a painting I did over here. I'll show you that painting in a moment. On either side, there's the television. On either side of the television, there are two niches, and those niches have paintings as well. This is a bathroom that's way over the top. And here's one of the niche paintings here, and its influence. And another one there, which I did all these, I guess, should tell you. And this is over the bed. Over the bed again. At the front desk. And for Palio's restaurant, we did the plates of the charger, and then the whole thing, and the silverware. And this is how things get done. Glasses that were drawn in my sketchbook that get taken over by the computer guys, and they put real dimensions to them. And then the foam models are made by the model maker, and then the real thing is made by the prototypes at the bottom. More of the same. Now, almost over. When I got back from Rome and when I was really looking for things to put on the walls in my house, I had my drawings, but I didn't want to look at my drawings. So I really don't have my drawings up in my house, except in my studio. And I thought how wonderful it was for Corot, who was there in 1850 at the French Academy, and he went back 3 or 4 times to Rome and stayed a few years each time, and did these marvelous paintings like this sketch he did on the aqueduct coming into Rome. Here's the aqueduct coming along there. Ah, shoot, I'm sorry. And here is the Ponte Angeli in Rome, also so Corot. So what I did was thinking that I could follow Corot, and I could be like Corot, and I could paint like Corot. So I did Corots. So now I have a house full of Corots done by me. And there's another one. And here's another one of the stadium. This is a marvelous one. He did a little sketch this big out on the site. And he used to do them on paper because canvas was very expensive. So he did these little paper sketches. Oil on paper is a real no-no for painters that know that. But here is the ruins of the bridge at Narni. And here's the bridge there, and here's the water underneath. And that's really all there is. So he went back to his studio, and he took the sketch, and he blew it up to be sort of 10 feet long, and added the shepherds, the sheep, the trees, more shepherds, more landscape. So he corrected nature, like Capability Brown. I mentioned Richard Wilson. He made a drawing of this barn with these wonderful columns, and I thought, my God, I've never seen columns have such majesty. And so I took his drawing and painted it. So here's Richard Wilson, painted by MG. And here are columns inside 3 on the Bund in Shanghai, the same kind of idea, enclosing this space. And I'll end with a series of paintings that aren't Corot, but are mine. So here they are. That's a good one. And there's my little studio with paintings from floor to ceiling. And with that, I thank you.